Eagles Entertainment.
With the 13th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by LifeBrand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and today we continue our breakdown of the 2022 NFL Draft. We've got two more of these episodes where we're looking around the NFL, and today Ben and I are going to focus in on the NFC and AFC West. So we've got 8 teams to cover here in Draft Buzz. We'll do it right at the top of the show. Again, Ben Fennell and I breaking down those 8 teams and just looking at some of the picks that stood out to us throughout the course of the entire draft, not just in round 1 or round 2, but from rounds 1 through 7. We're going to take a look at all the different picks that stood out to us for a number of different ways. And then we'll get into a couple questions from you at home in our draft mailbag. But first, the best way to reach us is to go on to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a review. It's the best way to reach us. It's the best way to throw us your support. So if you've been listening to the podcast throughout the course of draft season and you want to send us thank you, that's the best way to do it. If you've got a question, if you want a topic covered here in the next few weeks before we start getting into our previews for 2023, that is the place to do it. Appreciate everybody that has thrown us your support. And again, appreciate that so much. That said, let's get to the top of the show. Excited to start things off with Ben Fennell in Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, excited to get started here on Draft Buzz with Ben Fennell. And Ben, we're taking a look at 8 more teams here today. NFC West, AFC West. And we'll start with a team that initially did not have a top 10 pick in the draft. And then after a trade of their star quarterback resulted in getting them back a top 10 pick in this draft. That's the Seattle Seahawks, who spent the 9th overall pick on left tackle Charles Cross from Mississippi State. He is their top selection. At the end of the day, like, he was the 3rd tackle, so it's not like they picked between him and Ekwonu and Neal, but at the end of the day, why do you feel like he was the pick for the Seattle at number 9?
Well, they're in a clear rebuild. No Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner, Dwayne Brown gone. We need to start adding some cornerstone pieces to this roster. And what better way to do that than a franchise left tackle? This is a team that has a variety of needs at both sides of the ball and all sorts of positions. So I think addressing the trenches in this rebuild is really important. So I think, adding to the offensive line and maybe figuring out that quarterback position in year 2, year 3 of the rebuild is the way to go. But Charles Cross, high-level prospect, I think he's going to be a really nice kind of backside left tackle for a number of years.
Yeah, and Charles Cross at left tackle. They drafted Abe Lucas in the 3rd round. He has been a 4-year starter at right tackle at Washington State. So 2 guys that came from very heavy, pass-heavy offenses going to what most would say is going to be a run-first offensive attack now with Russell Wilson out the door. I think that alone is interesting. I will say this about Charles Cross. You and I both studied Cross from early in his career, pre-Mike Leach, and he was obviously recruited to play in a different system and played in a different system as a true freshman. But this is a guy that has that ability to be hand in the dirt, get you off the line of scrimmage. He could push people around. There is a toughness element to him, so he's not just like your typical air raid tackle. Just something to watch there for him as he transitions into this new system. Let's now get to the next pick here. The draft pick that made you go, huh? And we've done this in the past with like our mock draft roundups with people's mock drafts, Ben. So which pick surprised you? Is there, and surprise could be a number of different things. Is there one that kind of stood out to you? He's like, oh, that one was a little bit surprising.
Not necessarily the area of the draft that he went, but just based on their positional needs. I was surprised to see them take Kenneth Walker in the 2nd round. With Rashad Penny, the former 1st round pick, Chris Carson is still there in that stable. They like involving the Travis Homer. I just didn't think running back in round 2 would be the priority there. But Kenneth Walker, I expected somebody to take him on early day 2. He's going to be a really nice player for somebody for a number of years. I think he's one of the better combo backs in this class, probably a more well-rounded skill set than those 3 running backs I had mentioned. So, it was just a bit of a shock when the pick came down. I thought they were going to go another area, maybe defensive line there, maybe edge rusher. Maybe offensive line again, maybe even quarterback there with that round 2 pick. I just wasn't thinking running back at the time as much as I think that's a great value pick for Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, Walker will be interesting. Chris Carson, it sounds like the injury bug has just gotten to be too much with him. And so, unfortunately, that seems to be the case. But, Penny, like you mentioned, he caught a lot of steam down the stretch last year. And so there was hope. They brought him back. There was hope that he'd be able to kind of ride that momentum into a successful 2022. But if you're going to take Kenneth Walker in the top 42 of this draft, my guess is he's going to be the guy for them early on.
I also just thought, them moving on from Bobby Wagner, that round 2 there, there was a lot of linebackers on the board, nearly all of them to be had. So I just thought there was that captain, quarterback of the defense, 10-year linebacker on the board for them that they were going to address in this rebuild, just like the left tackle. They kind of did an okey doke on me and went running back, but I hope it works out for everybody.
All right, well, let's get to day 3. Is there a guy that you think has the chance to play the most snaps? Who do you feel like really kind of has that chance to have an early impact for this group on early day 3?
I'm glad they took Bo Melton in the 7th round. He's a guy that I think was a really productive player at Rutgers, had a really nice week down at the Senior Bowl quietly, good tester. I think he's going to be all over that slot receiver role. And I know you may say, well, what about Tyler Lockett? That really isn't Tyler Lockett's MO. He wins down the field, wins outside the numbers, can win over the middle, but really not this true and true slot presence. So I think you have DK, you have Tyler Lockett in there. I think Bo Melton can really win that third receiver job. I see, Freddie Swain on the roster, D. Eskridge, who they took in the 2nd round last year, much more of a gadgety type of player. That I think Derek Young, who also they took in the 7th round out of Lenore Rhine, is going to be more of a gadgety type of backfield slot back type of presence. I think Bo Melton is a true through and through slot receiver, is going to catch a lot of balls from Drew Lock or Geno Smith or somebody else on 3rd down.
Early on day 3, their first 2 picks were Kobe Bryant, the corner from Cincinnati, and then Tariq Woolen, the corner from UTSA. I think Woolen will take some time before he's like ready to play, but I feel like Kobe Bryant is a guy that could come in and compete for early playing time. So that would be someone to watch there in that Seattle secondary. And then just big picture, this is a team that really, when you look at the way, this is a little, and they'll never say this publicly, but obviously, look, when you trade your franchise quarterback, you're retooling a little bit. It might be on the fly. It might not be a full tear down rebuild, but you're trying to, kind of boost up everything around you. They got a bunch of picks back from Denver. They made some trades here in this draft and acquired a whole bunch of capital. So I think when you look at the amount of picks they made, offensive tackle, edge rusher, offensive tackle, corner, edge rusher, wide receiver, priority positions, right? So that's just something to watch there with this team. And they're always going to be focusing on traits. There was all the talk with them and what they look at from an athletic threshold, the body typing, that all comes from Green Bay, John Schneider and the Ron Wolf tree. So all of that will still be in play for Seattle moving forward. Let's now move to the next team here, and that's the Arizona Cardinals. And this is a team that did not make a first-round draft choice, Ben, because they traded that first-round pick on draft night for Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Marquise Brown. 4 first-round picks in this draft were traded for veteran wide receivers. I just kind of think that's an interesting phenomenon. Honestly, we saw one here in Philadelphia with A.J. Brown. But just thoughts overall on Marquise Brown ending up in Arizona. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins reportedly suspended for the first 6 games of the season. So I would think that that acquisition had something to do with that.
I mean, it's an exciting offseason. And as much as the quarterbacks and Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson on the move, these receivers really stole the show at Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Marquise Brown getting moved on draft night 1 there. But the Arizona Cardinals, that's the basketball team on grass in the NFL. They love their 10 personnel sets, their 4 receiver sets. They want speed and athleticism on the perimeter, and there is no shortage of it. AJ Green is getting up there. They want to work in Rondale Moore. No more Christian Kirk. DeAndre Hopkins dealing with a suspension now in early 2022. They had a need for receiver. So pairing Marquise Brown, I'm sure he got the full endorsement from Kyler Murray, one of his good friends and college quarterback, to add to that offense. And anytime you can find a receiver with 2, 3, 4 years of experience and maturation in this league, that may make them feel better about getting him on the field and not having that developmental learning curve with a potential rookie receiver. Some rookies can come right on and produce. Some take a day or two, a year or two, a season or two. So Marquise Brown is going to be a guy that can come right in, contribute right away. So I think they had a need there, and there was a relationship with the quarterback. I think everyone's kind of happy.
But when you talk about like surprise impact, someone who could shock us with what they do here as a rookie in year 1, and you made the point about, this is a team that historically has liked those spread formations. They played more 10 personnel than anybody. They like to spread people out. I kind of wonder if they, you look at their first pick in this draft was tight end Trey McBride. You already have Zach Ertz there on the roster. You're going to draft a tight end in the 2nd round with a veteran there already there installed. I wonder if we're going to see a lot more 12 personnel than we're used to seeing with Arizona. And if we start to see those 2 tight ends on the field more, and you'll talk about losing Christian Kirk, Hopkins already out for the first chunk of the season. Do we see more 12 personnel? Could we see more Trey McBride than maybe we would expect, after first glance at this selection?
And Cliff did have a propensity of using 12 personnel in the past when all of his tight ends were healthy. This is not a two-back system. This is not somebody that plays a lot of pony or a fullback. They like their 12 and they like their receivers out there. So I think Zach Ertz and then Trey McBride are a really nice compliment. But I'm willing to kind of play those guys all over the place. I think Trey McBride can do a lot of different things for you, can maybe be a pseudo H-back type of weapon as well, not to mention his ability to block in the run game. I don't see Trey McBride coming off the field a whole lot. And then Zach Ertz's athleticism in the pass game, a lot of interesting weapons. Now I just want to see their philosophical approach. Like you had said, we're going to beef up and run the ball a little bit more. We're just going to keep spreading it out. I really want to see that their kind of offensive attack into Kyler Murray's now 4th year in the NFL.
When you look at their day 3 picks, and they made a handful here. So you got two picks in round 6, 3 picks in round 7. When you look at those 5 selections, who's got the highest floor? Who's the guy that you're like, I could see this guy making an impact early just because we kind of know what he brings to the table?
And I don't think this is going to come with an exceptionally high ceiling, but I think you know what you're getting with Jesse Luketa, who they took out of Penn State in the 7th round. A guy that plays extremely hard, with his hair on fire, relentless, good special teamer, plays very well in space, versatile player. And he's played some Mike, some Will, some Sam, some defensive end, some sub rushing stuff. And at the end of the day, he's going to play some special teams for you. And how about those 3rd down packages from Vance Joseph, where they just like loading the line of scrimmage with 5, 6, sometimes 7 athletic pass rushers. And they just like to walk them around. And we've seen the Tanner Viejos and the Dennis Gardex and those guys come onto the field and rush the passer from all over the place. That could be Jesse Luketa. You may only see him on 3rd and 5+ in special teams, but I think you're going to get a really strong football player, a guy you know what you're getting. That means it's a high floor type of pick. Jace may not come with that exceptionally high ceiling as well.
I kind of wonder, and this is almost like it's not necessarily the player that I feel like is high floor, because I feel like this is a ceiling play. This is a ceiling selection, but I feel like the opportunity is there for you to say like, all right, like I feel good about this guy's chances to make the roster. And that's that first day 3 selection, running back Keontae Ingram from USC. He was a big time recruit, went to Texas. He had some success there, but ultimately ended up transferring out when the new staff got there, got to USC and had a solid season. It wasn't a great USC offense, especially after Drake London and Keaton Slovis got hurt. So I think when you look at Ingram, this is a guy that can come in. Look, they lost 2 of their top 4 backs from last year. And so there are carries to be had for an offense behind James Conner, who has had some injury issues himself over the course of his career, right? So I look at Keontae Ingram and say, like, this is a guy that has a pretty good shot at making this roster. So that's a name I would keep an eye on there in terms of having that year 1 impact. For me, just kind of big picture, this is a team and I'll try and be more cognizant of doing this as we go through every stage of the process, Ben. But in a few weeks, we're going to start our previews of 2023, and we're going to start looking at this fall. And we're going to start with our conference previews. And that first episode we do is all the players outside of the Power 5 conferences, and then we'll do each preview of each conference individually. No fan base should be paying more attention to our outside the Power 5 conference preview than the Arizona Cardinals. You just look at this draft. When you look at what they did on day 2, Trey McBride, Cam Thomas, Majay Sanders, all 3 from outside the Power 5. When you look at who they select over the course of Steve Keim's tenure there in Arizona, it is just littered with small school players. I mean, just outside of the fact that they took Hassan Reddick in round 1, right, a few years ago, and I just went through who they did on day 2 in this draft. Since he's been there on day 3, Morgan State, Fordham, Grambling, Midwestern State, Harvard, Southeast Louisiana, Northern Iowa, Delaware State, Pittsburgh State, Murray State, Valdosta State, right? So literally, and the Valdosta State was just this year. When you're looking at this team, they are willing to take chances on those small school players, and that continued here this year. So that's just one big takeaway from the Arizona Cardinals. Let's now go to the San Francisco 49ers. Ben, this is a team that, all eyes kind of were on coming in. Obviously, they did not have a first-round pick. They traded it to Miami in the deal to get Trey Lance. So they did not have a first-round pick here in this one. But they go to round 2, and they take pass rusher Drake Jackson from USC, 61 overall. What did you think of the Drake Jackson pick? Why do you think he was the selection for the 49ers?
Well, I feel like the 49ers are never shy about adding high-level prospects and talent to the defensive line room, particularly with high draft capital as they have in the past with Kinlaw and Armstead and Bosa and guys like that. So I think adding Drake Jackson to that room. But at the end of the day, Fran, I think the San Francisco 49ers think Drake Jackson's a much higher level prospect than the consensus. That USC program was all over the place in his time there. He really flashed some high level ability and left you disappointed in certain weeks. And that was really their entire program from top to bottom. So Drake Jackson in a vacuum, I think the San Francisco 49ers had him graded much higher than a lot of other teams and maybe some media members. So I think adding a defensive line prospect like that to the room is what you want to do with that second round pick there.
It's funny because when I saw that he was the pick on the Friday night of the draft, it's almost like when the Eagles select an offensive lineman, when the Pittsburgh Steelers select a wide receiver, when one of these teams select a position where, like, man, they've had so much success at pinpointing these kind of players and the high upside swings and hitting. I feel like the last 2 or 3 years in particular, San Francisco has had a lot of luck with kind of getting the most out of their pass rushers. And so when I look at Drake Jackson ending up there, that gives me a little bit more faith that he could kind of hit that ceiling. So that's a fun one to kind of project. When you talk about the young players now joining this team, is there a favorite role projection that you have? And you look at their selections, is there a guy who's you can say, like, all right, year one, I could see the role he could play in this offense or on this defense from day one, right out of the gate?
I think that's going to be SMU receiver Danny Gray, who they took in the third round, another guy that was maybe higher than consensus, but absolute track speed coming out of SMU out there. I think he's going to be a great downfield weapon for the offense. They love to obviously run the football with that Kyle Shanahan offense and take their play action shot plays down the field. Last few years, their downfield targets, pretty much Debo and George Kittle. They need somebody else to kind of be that complementary skill set now that Debo is literally doing everything for that offense and hopefully doing more for them in 2022 here as the relationship is a little stretched at the moment. But Danny Gray at the very end of the day, just be that downfield shot play weapon that we've seen from Kyle Shanahan at nearly every stop, whether you're Taylor Gabriel or Travis Benjamin and guys like that. There's a place for the undersized speedster in his offense.
What's your take on Tyrion Davis-Price ending up there? Because I kind of look at it a couple fold. Obviously, look, Elijah Mitchell had plenty of success last year as a rookie, but he's a different package. He's a little bit smaller. He's already dealing with some durability issues, right? That are already coming off of his rookie season. I almost look at Tyrion Davis-Price not just there, but also like you think of some of the things they did with Debo Samuel last year in the backfield. And you say, all right, like if you're just going to have line up in the shotgun next to the quarterback and run outside zone, well, give that ball to Tyrion Davis-Price. Like this is a guy who's got that same thick lower half, ability to put his foot in the ground and get downhill, and the speed to get to the perimeter. I think he's got a role early on in this offense.
And Elijah Mitchell has some really great vision, and when they put Debo back there, he has some playmaking ability. Tyrion Davis-Price is the no-nonsense guy. I think in the outside zone and the mid-zone game, he's going to put his foot in the ground and be a one-cut guy.
Yeah.
But then he can also really do a lot of gap scheme stuff, which he did at LSU quite a bit, and really wear down defenses, then bring him back in out of the bullpen in the fourth quarter type of guy. I think he really has a nice skill set to maybe take some of that pounding off of Debo and maybe take some of that kind of snaps and play time from Elijah Mitchell and just a little bit of a different style. So I'm looking at Trey Sermon there that they took in the third round last year as those two kind of battling for that RB2 job.
Yeah, and you mentioned him doing a little bit more of the gap scheme stuff as well. I mean, Kyle Shanahan, they've used a little bit more of the gap scheme stuff over the years. This is not just inside-outside zone. You'll see them mix in, especially counter, start to run some of those. And I feel like Tyrion Davis-Price could be a really good fit there. When you talk about day three ceiling with this group, I'm kind of looking around, and they took a bunch of players on day three in this draft. This was a tough one for me. On one end, I could say like Nick Sickell, and you could say like, okay, like the tackle from Fordham they took in the sixth round. He had a really rough week down there in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, but the athleticism is there. I think that there are some traits that you can work with. I've been a big fan of Tariq Castro-Fields, Ben. I don't know that I would say like he's the high ceiling play. If we were talking floor, I feel like he's the high floor guy. I don't know. Where's your head at? We talk about high ceiling for these day three selections.
Well, this guy flashed a little bit as I was watching Tyson Anderson at Toledo. And that was that corner nickel hybrid player, Samuel Womack, who surprised some people with them being with him selected in the fifth round ahead of Penn State's, Tariq Castro-Fields. This guy was 5'9", 189, ran sub 4.4 with an absolutely blazing 10-yard split at 1.54. incredible 3-cone. He's played some corner, some safety. I think he's a shoe-in to be a nice slot defender, that nickel defender for them. Has to beat out Emmanuel Mosley right now on the depth chart. Also 500-plus special team snaps. Has some really high-level athletic ability, some toughness, some positional versatility. Played at Toledo. Let's get some NFL coaching kind of onto his back and into his pedigree. I really think Samuel Womack's best football might be ahead of him.
Yeah, one of the few outside the Power 5 selections that they have made. I mean, they have primarily been a big school operation. We talked about this when they had the number 3 pick last year, was why, some people may think that it was going to be Mac Jones, because they have rarely gone outside the Power 5. Obviously, they decided to go that route with Trey Lance here from the FCS level. But typically, when you see this organization, they go heavy with seniors from big schools that are tough and aren't bad athletes. And if you say okay, that's your template, that's not a bad template. That's not a bad sandbox to play in. So I think ultimately that's typically what the trend is with the 49ers since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have been there together.
Yeah, a bit of a countering trend in the middle there, going with a UTSA and a Fordham and a Toledo there, and then getting back to the Penn States and the big schools.
Yeah, they typically that has not been the trend for them lately, and so it was interesting that they did that here in this draft. Let's now go to the Rams, the last team here in the NFC West, who didn't have a first round pick.
Shouldn't take us too long here.
Yeah, it didn't have a second round pick. We know how they feel about them picks, but it's funny. Obviously, that's been a big slogan for them throughout the course of this entire offseason. No team drafts more than the Rams. They just collect all the picks on day 3. When you have all the comp picks and all the picks they get from, via trade, they always end up with a boatload of picks. It's just that they don't happen until rounds 4 through 7. That said, third round, one of the compensatory picks, they end up with Logan Bruss, the offensive line from Wisconsin. In your mind, why was he the pick? They've had some success from that school up front on the offensive line.
Yeah, as it sets right now, they're slated to start 3 offensive linemen from Wisconsin, with David Edwards at left guard, Logan Bruss could be the right guard, and Rob Havenstein at right tackle. I think obviously the offensive line is the kind of the weak link of this entire roster at the moment. No more Andrew Whitworth and some guys like that. So having to address the offensive line and retooling them, I think is really important. But to take this just a step back, this is not a team that has just bought their players and has just bought their roster. It's a complementative and really a balanced way of building the roster. It just so happens there's some high profile moves, so they took away some high profile draft picks. But, the mid-round picks, the Cooper Kupps and Van Jeffersons and Brian Allens and David Edwards. And Rob Havenstein was a second-round pick in 2015. The guy's played tons of football for the Rams. He's played in multiple Super Bowls for the Rams. That guy never gets his name called. There are actual homegrown draft picks up and down this roster that are high-level contributors. So it's not just they bought all these free agents and they don't draft anyone, and anyone in the draft doesn't contribute. That really isn't the case. I know I'm being a little facetious with it, but it's really much more of a balanced roster than I think the headlines would suggest.
So I've got a tough question for you, because we were talking about doing some different categories, and one of the categories we wanted to hit on this week was potential position battle that guys that I've set up in the draft. This is a team that did not have a top 100 pick. Basically, when you don't have that, it's tough to say, oh yeah, this guy's going to come in and fight for a starting job right away. That said, is there a potential position battle in camp that you kind of feel like sets up with one of these rookies?
Yeah, I think there's going to be 2 fun ones, particularly the third down running back role.
Yep.
Tyron Williams, they took in the 5th round. He's going to have to compete with Xavier Jones and Raymond Calais. Now, I know Xavier Jones and Raymond Calais may not excite you with a name. These guys have been in the league now for 2-3 years. They understand things. Things are slowing down for them, so they're a step ahead. Kyron, obviously a much higher level prospect coming out of Notre Dame, but I think it's going to be an open season battle out there for that third down role, the pass catching role in that Rams offense. And the other one, look out for Jacoby Durant.
Yes, that's the one I was going to go with, man.
To challenge Troy Hill, who they just brought back over from Cleveland, who was in...
He was on their team in 2020. He was on the 2020 team.
That was the connection. I know he bounced around and bounced back.
He was there and left when Brandon Staley was there. He was the defensive coordinator. He left in free agency for a big contract with Cleveland. Cleveland took the corner this year. Who did they just drafted? Martin Emerson. And so they just had this glut of corners, and so they traded him back to the Rams.
Correct. But, I know they made the trade, and I do not know the compensation or the implications of the compensation of the contract, but look out for Jacoby Durant to really challenge for some play time out of South Carolina State. He is small, but he is feisty, and he will play in this league for a long time.
I love Jacoby Durant on film. He is a guy absolutely keep an eye on. And look,
the Buster Screen, the Captain Munnerlyn type, don't count him out based on his size.
If Cam Akers is fully healthy and if he is the 3 down back, right? Like if he is the guy, like, all right, he's going to be the workhorse. And Darrell Henderson gets put down to like 3rd down back and specialty package back, I wouldn't be shocked if Kyron Williams eats into some of that package. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't think that he's obviously not as dynamic as Darrell Henderson, but he is good right away. I mean, he might be the best pass protector day one in that backfield. So I kind of say like he's going to come in and play. So I wonder if he's going to eat into Henderson snaps a little bit. Again, if Akers is fully healthy coming off that Achilles from last year, that would be just my big take on that running back spot for them.
Eagles fans, Merrill Reese here to tell you about the Eagles Autism Challenge, presented by Lincoln Financial Group. This annual ride, run, walk event supports autism research and programming as we work hard every day to advance the conversation from awareness to action. This year's event will take place on Saturday, May 21st at Lincoln Financial Field. With your support, we can help transform the lives of individuals affected by autism. Register today at eaglesautismchallenge.org.
Let's now transition to the Denver Broncos, a team that did not have a first-round pick, but they did have their 2nd, 3rd, 4th-round selections after the Russell Wilson deal. Then their first pick in this draft, 32 overall in the 2nd round, so 64th overall in the draft, pass rusher Nick Bonito from Oklahoma. Ben, this is a player that many felt could go earlier. This is the pick that they got from the Rams, ironically enough, in the Von Miller trade, and they go out and they get an undersized pass rusher with a lot of speed off the edge.
Yeah, an insanely productive player at Oklahoma in his 3-4 years there, and a little bit of a different mold than a lot of the pass rushing studs in the class. A little bit different than the Thibodeaux and the Jermaine Johnsons and the Aiden Hutchinsons and Trayvon Walker. This guy's barely 230 pounds. He played sub 230 most of his career at Oklahoma, but was able to win by being a high side speed rusher, a QB spy, a guy that can play in space exceptionally well. And when you look at this Broncos front 7, there's some well-built guys in this front 7. There's some thick players. There's some no-nonsense types, some really good run defenders. I think you really need a more complementative playmaker in the front 7 to the Bradley Chubb and the newly signed Randy Gregory, at the all intents and purposes, the quarterback hunter spot. I think Benito is going to be a guy that's going to be able to sub rush for you and do some really creative stuff for that defense, whether it's blitzing from depth, playing in space for maybe a Sam linebacker role, being a quarterback spy, or just finding ways to get him one-on-one because he is an exceptional, explosive one-on-one pass rusher. Broncos fans, you want to mold on who he could be? I think he's very close to a Brian Burns. Maybe not as loose, maybe not as deep of a pass rush arsenal, but that type of player.
He's built like Von in terms of like the short kind of rocked up frame, but he's really loose and athletic. It's going to be an interesting select. I'm interested to see how he develops.
Yeah, not nearly as long as Brian Burns. Yeah, Von Miller would have been a more appropriate comp. I don't know why I wasn't thinking of that.
You try to think too outside the box sometimes. You got to get out of your own head, Fennell. All right, so let's get to the next category here with pick that made you go, And again, this is just a pick that surprised us a little bit. I'm going to go to the 3rd round, Ben. They selected UCLA tight end Greg Dulcich, and not just the selection, because look, they traded Noah Fant in the Russell Wilson deal. You had Albert Okwuegbunam, who's been semi-productive when he's been given the opportunity there. Not only that, but then afterwards, with the press conferences saying how excited they are about incorporating these both tight ends into the offense, how excited Russell Wilson is to work with the tight ends in this offense. Russell Wilson has not been a heavy producer to tight ends over the course of his career. He has been known more for working the perimeter and working outside vertically down the field, not necessarily working between the hashes down the seam to all the different tight ends that they've brought in. So I kind of wonder for you, looking, this offensive scheme pretty well, with Hackett coming from Green Bay. Do you feel like this is kind of an interesting fit in terms of having these two long, lean, athletic tight ends that can get down the seam in this offense?
Yeah, I think it's a good fit. They very much embody the Robert Tonyan type of role coming from Green Bay, who was a double-digit touchdown guy just 2 years ago, and they love to stretch down the seam and work in the pass game. But Nathaniel Hackett wants that true wide tight end that's never coming off the field. It doesn't get a lot of glory. That's the Mercedes Lewis type of role. He's going to block his butt off in the run game, pass protect a lot on the shot plays. I'm not sure if that guy's even on the roster right now. he may not be for this year. That's a hard position to find and fill. There's only so many that can do that type of role for you at an NFL level week in and week out. So they may just be looking to add more weapons around Russell Wilson and just attacking the pass game. And they have a nice stable of tight ends. Is it what Nathaniel Hackett and the offense typically go with? Not usually, but there are a lot of exciting weapons on this offense for him.
All right, well, let's get into these day 3 selections. A player that we feel could play the most snaps as a rookie for this group here on day 3. And they have a bunch of, two 4s, 3 5s, a 6, and a 7. So a bunch of opportunity here for these rookies in terms of someone we can go with. For me, I'm going to go to the 6th round. Matt Henningsen, the nose tackle from Wisconsin. I feel like as a guy that could come in, when you look at that depth chart, who's a guy that can come in, stick, and play a role early, I would look at Henningsen, who did not get a combine invite, but was at the Shrine Bowl. I thought his film was really good. I thought this was a draftable player all the way. And this is a guy I think that has that ability to not just get after the quarterback a little bit, but he's going to stop the run at a really high clip. I would watch out for Henningsen to come in and play a role early on as a rookie.
And reminded me a lot of like a Shelby Harris, who's now gone in free agency, who played a lot of good football for him and maybe an era previous. Remember the way Garrett Wolf showed up for that defensive line?
Nice.
A straight no-nonsense type, going to beat the heck out of you at the point of attack, really good run defender. It's going to be the sexiest guy on third down rushing the passer? Probably not. But you know what you're getting with Matt Henningsen, and they need players in the trenches to play the run on early downs. And looking at this front 7, I see some playtime and some snaps to be had. So look for big Matt Henningsen to be a major contributor this year for the Broncos.
I like it. All right, well, let's get to our next team here in the rundown, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders. And this is a team that another one that did not have a first-round pick. And so, again, a very consistent theme with a lot of these teams that we've talked about here today. Obviously, they don't have one due to the trade for Devontae Adams. They didn't have a second-round pick. So you get to round 3. Dylan Parham, the offensive lineman from Memphis, the first pick here for the Las Vegas Raiders. Ben, what do you think here of Dylan Parham?
Well, he's a nice player. He's a real athletic piece out of Memphis after converting, I believe, from tight end to eventually guard there at Memphis. So, yeah, it's really quick off the ball, good getting up to the second level. But we just need more stability and competition on the interior offensive line of this Raiders team. We need to figure out who is going to play in front of Derek Carr on a week-to-week basis. We don't want this revolving door at the center and the guard spot that seemingly plagued them all last year with Leatherwood in and out of the lineup and John Simpson in and out. Andre James eventually, carved out that center role since converting from left tackle. A lot of moving parts on this line. So I think they just need some stability. They took Dylan Parham out of Memphis, 3rd-round pick with their first pick in the draft. And let's see if he can go steal that job from somebody. They have Jermaine Illumier back to compete as well. So at the end of the day, we need stability on this offensive line. I almost don't care who wins the job or loses the job. Let's just roll with 5 for multiple weeks in a row. I just want to see stability and consistency on this line. And Dylan Parham absolutely has an opportunity to steal one of those starting spots. And
that's why that versatility is so important for him. I totally agree. And a team that, they're willing, when you look at this coaching staff and this front office, they've been very willing to use players use offensive linemen, put those guys in early if they've got that versatility to basically plug it where it leaks.
And remember, new regime coming in here. We got new GMs, new head coaches, new position coaches. There are no friends here. So as much as, a guy may have started every game last year, I think it's open season competition at nearly every spot on the roster. Maybe Derek Carr and Devontae Adams have their spots carved out. But, and Andre James, I know he played a lot of snaps at center last year for him. I'm not willing to say it's his job. That could be Dylan Parham for the future there at center.
When you look at, 6 picks total for this team in this draft. So not a lot of options here to pick from, but who's the guy that you feel like could have a surprise impact from day one?
Oh, you know where I'm going with this. It's 5th-round pick Matthew Butler there out of Tennessee, who I think can play some nose shade for you and maybe be Hankins' backup and then show some juice at 3-tech and get up after the passer. I think he has one of the better combo skill sets on this defensive front. They got Vernon Butler in free agency, Bilal Nichols in free agency. We'll see how those fits are. Jonathan Hankins is going to be that nose tackle on early downs. Matthew Butler has a lot of ability to contribute in both the run and the pass. Really good player at Tennessee. Some of his best tape against Alabama, Georgia, and some of the best offensive lines in the SEC. I think he's a heck of a football player, and I expect him to be on the field a lot and have a bunch of TFLs this season. So look out for big Matthew Butler.
Yeah, he's a player. I mean, you plug him, and also Neil Farrell.
Neil
Same
Farrell,
deal.
yep.
I mean, the defensive tackle from LSU. They took the round before in the 4th round. They're going to do some different things. Obviously, Farrell more of a nose, Butler more of a pure 3. But you mentioned the position versatility with both. I think they've got that ability to slide up and down the line. I would keep an eye on both guys there to be able to come in
and don't forget big Chandler Jones now opposite of Max Crosby. Suddenly, some fleet of foot, good first step edge rushers. What happens? Quarterback stepping up right into the big guy. So I think Matthew Butler in combination with the Chandler Jones and some of those other pieces on the front 7, they needed to obviously change the culture there in that front 7. They got some nice pieces this offseason.
So we talked about a couple of day 3 selections. Is there another guy that kind of stands out to you as like, oh, this guy's got a high floor from this group of day 3 picks? I mean, we're talking 2 other guys. Thayer Munford, the offensive lineman from Ohio State. He's played some tackle and guard. And then Britton Brown, the running back from UCLA.
Yeah, some nice pieces there. Even some undrafted guys I think have a chance to maybe carve out some roles. I like Sincere McCormick out of UTSA. But the guy you had mentioned a few minutes ago, Neil Farrell, I think is a clone to Jonathan Hankins. I think all he has to do is focus on being Hankins' backup when he needs a blow or that second unit comes in. Just be that nose tackle, one tech run plugger, and get off the field on 3rd down. So I think Neil Farrell, look at how Jonathan Hankins shows up to work, practices, goes onto the field, embody that, and just do everything you can to be his backup for 2022.
All right, let's get to the next team here, and that's the LA Chargers. 2 teams left here in the AFC West. First pick, they end up going along the offensive line. They take Zion Johnson. And we weren't really counting this as a potential need. We didn't take into account. This is why we always talk about how important versatility is for the offensive line. The ability to slide Matt Filer out to offensive tackle. Zion Johnson can step in and start right away at guard. But Ben, thoughts on Zion Johnson being the pick here? They go best player available, and they're going to make it work up front with their best 5.
Yeah, it's an exciting pick for them. I think everybody on the offensive side and adding another high-level player to the offensive line in front of their franchise quarterback, Justin Herbert, should excite, everyone in that building and the fan base. So Zion Johnson, I think, is going to be a day 1 right guard next to Corey Linsley. We'll see what happens at the right tackle spot with a couple guys competing there. I'm also not willing to say Zion maybe won't slide out to tackle. I think that whole kind of right side can be boggled with Brendan Hymes as well. They took in the 5th round last year, played quite a bit. So Zion Johnson, I think, is a great piece to improve that offensive line. So many people thought they were going to go receiver and add some speed to that receiver room. They didn't draft any receivers, Fran. In fact, only brought in 1 undrafted receiver. So that's a kind of hey, we feel okay. You guys are the ones with the problem on the outside. So adding guys in the trenches should help everybody keep Herbert upright. And they got plenty of speed, and Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and guys like that.
They definitely did. Oh, when we talk about the rest of these rookies here and the rest of this class, is there a guy where you're like, all right, I like kind of projecting this guy's role forward? Is there where you say, like, all right, on offense or defense, knowing what we know right now about their schemes, where you're like, yeah, like I could see this guy coming in and playing a role early on. Is there a guy that stands out to you?
Yeah, it's Isaiah Spiller. They got in the 4th round. A lot of people had as a top 5 running back in this class. And I just think his size, his fumbling really caught up with him last year. I want to see Isaiah Spiller be that kind of bell cow, that thunder on early downs, wear down defenses, and let Eckler be the change of pace guy, the combo back on 3rd down, the scat back like that. And then you just see all the great pairs in the NFL. They have that thunder and lightning combination. I really thought they missed that last year in that Chargers offense, not only to take pressure off of Herbert with the run game, but just wear down opposing defenses. And I really think Isaiah Spiller has played a lot of good football in a high-level conference for Texas A&M. It's going to be a really good-looking piece for that Chargers offense. I expect him to be all over fantasy teams by halfway through the season.
I was going to ask you, like, from a fantasy standpoint, because I know that he's like one of the hot names to talk about, is like, because people were so high on him pre-draft, he falls to the 4th round. And so people are like, all right, well, can we kind of cool off on his buzz? But that hasn't really affected his buzz when you look at like fantasy drafts right now. I'm wondering, like, what do you think the role is if Eckler is healthy? Because we know, like, all right, if Eckler gets hurt, it feels like he steps right in. He's kind of the handcuff. He's the 3-down backup. But if Eckler's on the field, you feel like he still has a little bit of a role there?
I do. And I think, kind of thinking of how Joe Lombardi came from the Saints and the way he always paired Alvin Kamara with somebody to take the workload, whether it was the Mark Ingrams of the world and, guys that can run between the tackles on early down. and then let Eckler be that kind of gadget and that chess piece in the offense, and really more of a pass game weapon and a perimeter satellite back than a guy you want running the ball on first and second down. I could absolutely see Isaiah Spiller being a 150, 200 carry guy for this offense. Take pressure off the quarterback, take your shots off play action. Running the football is okay with a Justin Herbert. It's just going to make his life easier. And the more you have running backs that can bang and have the body armor to survive in the NFL, like an Isaiah Spiller at nearly 230 pounds, I love that proposition for the offense. So take some pressure off of Herbert, take some pressure off of Eckler. Perfect pick, in my opinion.
All right, well, let's stay here on day 3. And for me, just talking about like a high ceiling play, I want to go to UCLA defensive tackle Otito Ogbonnia, who the team selected there in round 5. This is a guy who's got a little bit more range than you would expect for a nose tackle. He's got the ability to make plays outside the numbers. He's got some straight line juice. He got recruited by a previous staff, so he's not just your kind of line of scrimmage dweller, hold up at the point of attack and not offer a ton of juice. He's got a little bit of that giddy up. So I think I look at Ogbonnia as a player that has that ability to be a little bit more than what he's been pigeonholed by from a narrative standpoint. He'd be a guy I'd watch here moving forward in terms of a high ceiling play for this team on day 3. Is there anybody that kind of fits that bill for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. Remember, Linval Joseph is gone, so they can use that big burly, nose tackle, run plugger there. They got Sebastian Joseph Day from the Rams in free agency, who's a little bit more of the undersized defensive tackle. So you may see Ogbonnia in the lineup more than it may suggest. Also, 7th round pick out of Purdue. Do not sleep on Xander Horvath. Really fun player. A lot of people have called the Kyle Juszczyk in this draft. He can do a lot of different stuff for you. He kind of looks like a burly fullback. He is very athletic. He can catch the ball. He'll block for you. He can take some handoffs. Don't sleep on the 7th round pick wearing ugly 45 and he looks like a fullback. He may have some more ability than his profile may suggest.
Yeah, that's the team that, look, they're willing to take chances on unique players, guys with like fun skill sets. And, even if it's like, this guy can only do this one thing, he can do it really well. They're willing to take shots on. And that's not even just like a Brandon Staley thing. If you look back over the course of Tom Telesco's career, he's always taken chances on guys that have kind of unique skill sets and unique backgrounds. So keep an eye on there with Horvath. Last team here, Kansas City Chiefs, top choice. They made 2 picks here in the first round after the trading away of Tyreek Hill. But let's talk through Trent McDuffie. They traded up to take Trent McDuffie. They also selected Purdue defensive lineman George Karlaftis. So this very easily could have been a pair of picks that the Eagles could have ended up with here. 2 players we talked a lot about for Eagles mock drafts over the course of the entire spring, Ben. But when you look about the trade up for McDuffie, obviously this is a team that plays a ton of man coverage. What do you think about that? Because he did not play a ton of man at Washington, and it's going to be a lot different here for them in the AFC West.
Well, I wasn't so concerned necessarily about the man zone and the coverage style and scheme, but just the versatility, because this is a back end that lost Daniel Sorensen and lost Tyrann Mathieu and lost Mike Hughes and lost Chark Ward. Those are 4 guys that played a lot of different roles. And those guys can play in the nickel. They can play some safety. A lot of these guys can play corner for him too. Tyrann Mathieu did so many different things. Sorensen and kind of his safety linebacker hybrid skill set. Those are all just secondary guys. So I think getting a tough presence in Trent McDuffie that can play outside corner, can slide in and play that nickel if you need him to, can play some zone, can play man, really high-level athlete. You had to go back to the defensive back room and recharge. I know they got Justin Reed in free agency, great pick. Glad they got Brian Cook in round 2, another guy to that secondary. But you had to replenish a lot of these losses, and I thought Trent McDuffie was the start of that in this draft.
When you talk about players that could come in and contribute early on and have a chance to fight for playing time, I mean, George Karlaftis, I feel like he's going to play early. You look at that defensive front. I don't even know if there's going to be like too much of a position battle there. I feel like Karlaftis, he's in line to play a lot. But one guy for me that I'm like, all right, like where's the position battle to watch in camp? 2 new players that they brought in, one via free agency, Jermaine Carter at Sam linebacker with Leo Chenal, the 3rd rounder from Wisconsin. I feel like those 2 guys at Sam linebacker, they drafted Nick Bolton in the 2nd round last year. He has been a stud so far. They drafted Willie Gay in the 2nd round a couple years ago, and he's still kind of finding his footing, missed most of his rookie year, so we'll see what he looks like here this summer. But at strong side linebacker, when they want to go play base or when they want to get into some of these unique packages, Carter and Chenal, that's an interesting battle there. I think 2 guys that have very, very similar skill sets.
Yeah, I really want to see how Brian Cook fits into this, who he needs to compete with to get play time, if he's going to be a starter next to Justin Reed, if it's going to be Reed and Thornhill, and Cook is just that third safety. But they clearly need to hit reset on replacing a lot of those losses in the secondary. One position battle I'm excited for, I think this right tackle spot is open season. I see Andrew Wiley, Lucas Niang as the incumbents. Look out for Darian Kennard there. Played a lot of good right tackle there for the Kentucky Wildcats. Good week down in Mobile. Massive presence that maybe isn't for everybody. The Chiefs are okay with it. They have Orlando Brown on the left side. I know a lot of people thought Kennard is a shoe-in fit to slide into guard. This is a team with two pretty good guards in Joe Thuney and Trey Smith at the moment. So they took Kennard in the 5th round. I see him competing at right tackle, and it would not surprise me to see Big Kennard as the starting day one right tackle to start the season this year. But I think it's going to be a real fun battle in camp, and I think it's anyone's job.
Yeah, Kennard for me was my pick for the guy with the day 3 ceiling, as somebody that just had, to me, when looking at all their selections around 4 through 7, I just felt like has that ability to, if he hits, he's going to hit in a big, big way. And so for me, Kennard was my pick for a day 3 ceiling. Did you have anybody that kind of fit that bill for you, or was that?
Isaiah Pacheco out of Rutgers, 7th round pick. He runs as hard as anyone in this class, maybe not super creative or super elusive, but a no nonsense guy. Look at this running back room, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Then I'm drawing a line under him. I see Ronald Jones, Derek Gore, Jarian Ely, and undrafted guy. I don't see any reason why Isaiah Pacheco can't be running back 2 to start this season, right behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I think they want to kind of manage his workload, keep him healthy for the whole season. And I could see Pacheco really being a nice change of pace and a kind of a guy to take some workload carries off of Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, for me, and then also because I agree everything with what you just said. It's funny because Pacheco, he kind of fits what they have been traditionally since Brett Veach has taken over in Kansas City, which, size, not a big deal. We love speed across the board, guys that test really well, guys that run really, really well on the field and on the track. But then when I look at the rest of this draft, it's kind of interesting. It feels like a little bit of a deterrence away from that. When you look at Trent McDuffie, what have we said about McDuffie the whole time? Oh, not super sexy. He's not the fastest. He's not the biggest, but he's just a really good football player. George Karlaftis, not the most explosive, not the bendy guy, but he's a really good football player. Brian Cook, really good football player. Leo Chenal, good football player. Darren Kennard, he's not a sexy dancing bear, but good football player. And that was kind of my themes walking away from this one, is just a little bit different than what we've seen in Chiefs drafts of the last few years. Sky Moore is a guy that, typically when they go outside the Power 5, it's for guys that are uber productive, and Sky Moore has been very, very productive. They also went down to Fayetteville State for Joshua Williams, the corner out down there. It's a supersized corner. He also had some production this past year as a senior. So that's just been kind of interesting in that, typically they've been okay with taking the big swings, but I kind of wonder if they're like, all right, we need this draft. We had a ton of picks here in this draft. Let's just go and get football players, guys that can come in and contribute early on. It feels like that was a goal for them in this draft.
Yeah, absolutely. They've always lent to be a little bit more traits-based drafters, and this Chiefs team is ready to win right now. They had some holes heading into the offseason and lost some players in free agency. They aren't rolling over for a season. They want to retool and get guys that are ready to plug and play, and that's what I see with a lot of those players. Karlaftis, Chenal, Darian Kennard, Brian Cook, Fran, those guys are ready to play tomorrow.
No doubt. And that's why that really stood out to me, just kind of looking at this draft as a whole. Well, Ben, we'll be back next week as our last one in terms of our draft recaps here for 2022. We'll put this class to bed and we'll start with big picture topics. But thanks once again for joining us here on the Journey of the Draft podcast presented by LifeBrand. We will talk to you next week.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the draft mailbag.
Good stuff there from Ben. A couple questions here from you guys at home. We're going to start with Bear Cub Fan, who said, I listen to this podcast all year round. Love the in-depth draft coverage. As a Chicago Bears fan, while we didn't get much help for Justin Fields with early round wide receivers and offensive line, what do you think of the Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker selection? So Bear Cub Fan, appreciate the comment, appreciate the question. Thank you so much for the 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts. With Kyler Gordon, look, this is a player that I know they were very, very high on Kyler Gordon. They were surprised that he was there, a player that they saw as a first-round talent, so certainly too good to pass up in that situation. Very athletic. He's versatile. He's played all three positions at the cornerback spot in that Washington secondary. He really improved this year, though, and this was the first year where he really held on to that starting job from start to finish. He was much improved as a tackler. He showed that ability to finish on the football down the field, so you're betting on the come. His most consistent, most productive football could be ahead of him. He's not a finished product, but there is a lot to work with there, and a high upside swing at a priority position in round 2. That's not a bad way to go if you're trying to build a team up, and obviously a team that has a lot of needs on both sides of the football. The defense certainly needed to add some blue chip pieces, and they believe that Kyler Gordon can be one of those blue chip pieces. And same thing can be said for Jaquan Brisker. We talked a lot about Brisker throughout the course of the pre-draft process. This is a guy that you just start checking boxes. Really good run defender, just so sound, very willing, really reliable in terms of being a tackler one-on-one. He can play in the box. He can come downhill and play from depth, top down, and be a reliable player in the alley. So I think when you look at Jaquan Brisker, run defense, not an issue. He's a former corner playing in high school and junior college, so made the move to safety. He's got some of those coverage chops. I wouldn't say like he's an A-plus athlete. He's honestly, it's almost like the opposite of Kyler Gordon, where Gordon, he's like dripping with traits, and you just want him to kind of make sure he kind of figures it out. With Brisker, I don't know that his traits aren't bad. His traits are just like pretty good across the board. If he had Kyler Gordon's traits, Brisker's going in round 1. And so I think that's what you're looking at with Brisker, is that he is just a really, really tough, physical, high character player, and also gives you those coverage chops. He'll be a great fit in that system that they're installing there in Chicago. So great stuff there from Bear Cub Fan. Hope you enjoyed that analysis. And then also just wanted to give a shout out to Bro Jim, who left a 5-star review just saying how much they love the podcast and the analysis here on the show. So thanks so much to Bro Jims and to Bear Cub Fan. Thanks to you both, and we'll talk to everybody here next week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by LifeBrand.